I'm here with John and one of my panelists for the upcoming, new 3 months on online discussion that we had. So John was with me in April when we talked about, how COVID has affected our lives, the way that we work and the way that, we live. And John is in Shenzhen, China. So that is the city that outside of Wuhan that has the most, coronavirus cases. And he was telling us, even in April, how they have come out of lockdown and they are no longer in that situation. So now 3 months down the road, how has it been? Because I heard that there are a couple of cities that have kind of like re-locked down in China as well.
Well, there's lots of specific cases. So I think earliest we had a case in Henan province where we had some guy who came back from a football match in Italy and didn't tell anybody. So that was when we were Shenzhen was no longer the second most case city because of that guy just coming back and sort of not telling anybody. It got all over the place in Henan. And that was sort of like the first alarm. I think that's one of the things that triggered a lot of people being very cautious about travel. And recently, of course, we had Beijing with the incident of what seems to have been food that was brought in and like the COVID having been frozen on food. Anyway, in some of the bigger cities like Shanghai, you can't buy raw fish. Everybody is avoiding salmon. I'm sure the salmon industry is having a horrible time. Right now, of course, with the Hong Kong flare-up, we're across the border from Hong Kong, so we're a little bit antsy because there are fairly long lines of people trying to get into Shenzhen, even facing a 2-week quarantine. And anytime there's people lining up to get across a border, that makes everybody a little bit nervous. Just because large crowds of people, we do have people who flock into shopping malls. We still have fairly big crowds of people, but we're avoiding things like sporting events or concerts and things like that. So whenever you see pictures of people sort of crowding into a situation like that, people I still get a little bit nervous. I think it's definitely dependent on the individual personality, but to me, I sit there and say, oh, I wonder if that's a disaster in the make.
I don't blame you because I get nervous as well. We just had our elections and there were a lot of people in rallies and so on, and that makes me super nervous.
Right.
But tell me a little bit about this Hong Kong. Hong Kong has gotten rid of it and now they have, I think, come back.
As I understand it, and maybe more information will come out better in the future, but as I understand it, it's directly related to flight crews coming in from overseas, and the rules and regulations around testing people coming in was fairly loose for flight crew staff as opposed to people landing. And they were advised you should stay in your hotel, don't go out. And some of them went out anyway. And so that's their current tracking, do the tracking. They said this is the case that seems to have come in. And that's now led to a mandatory testing for anybody coming in now from flight crew, which has led to some airlines not flying into Hong Kong. They're US carriers. So be very careful if you're on US carriers. It's worrisome.
Yeah, so all these flight crews. So I presume now the flight crew issue is taken care of, but then because there's a flare in Hong Kong, they're all trying to get into Shenzhen, and there's that, I guess, worry that they're bringing with them. What are they bringing with them into Shenzhen, right?
Well, we have a pretty good process of people coming in, having to go into 2 weeks quarantine. For some people who are elderly, though, and I'm not sure what the age cutoff is, somewhere in the 60s. If you're going to stay with family, you can go directly to stay with family. And I know that that's in part because sending an elderly person into quarantine could be a bit of a risk. You don't have access to care for them. You don't know what the situation will be like. But that then raises some questions as well, as if this person is in that 2-week window and they're staying with family, is that a higher risk? We have exceptional tracking in Shenzhen, which makes me feel pretty good that if people are coming in, hopefully they'll do a good job of self-isolating, and as will family. But all of those become a little bit more challenging to track because we're fully back at work, right? So if they're with family, we'd expect their family to go back to work. One silver lining is that kids are out of school. So if people are staying with family, it's easier to keep kids at home than it is if they were going to school in the morning. But kids are out of school because the school year is done, not because of COVID.
I see. So actually, you're all back at work and the kids are, I guess they should be back at school. It's just that now they're having holidays, I presume.
Yeah, exactly. So this is summer holiday for most places in China. I think I know some schools that were prolonged waiting to go back may still be in school like for the next week or two. But most schools are finally on summer holiday. And the chorus of the internet parents is, we just got rid of them. Now they're back again. So there's a little bit of extra adventure there for the parents to get the kids back. But we're all happy they're on summer holidays. So, and for at least for the case of my own son, he's enrolled in hip hop dance classes. So that's a sense of normalcy as well. So he's able to go to classes with other people and engage in classes. We ask him to wear a mask the whole time. And I'd say probably for things like that, maybe about 50–60% of people are still wearing masks in those sorts of events. But on the street, going into office buildings, it's still mandatory. At least to get into an office building, you have to have your temperature checked. You have to have your mask on. So even if people are not always wearing their mask, they're at least always carrying a mask, because for taxis, for DD, which is like Uber, for most of those things, that unless you have your own car and you're driving from your home to a park, you're likely to be in a situation where you're going to be asked to be wearing a mask.
So I guess if I can just understand what the situation is like, I mean, people have gone back to work. I guess, it's on school holidays, but they have kind of gone back to school. Shops are open. Sounds like classes, entertainment areas, they're all open.
Mostly, I don't see a lot of things like big sporting events and concerts and things like that. But the stuff that would be typical day to day, shopping malls are all open, restaurants are all open. There's a lot more people that would be sitting outdoor. I've noticed outdoor seating, even in summer, is very popular this year. I think people are trying to stay out of some of those enclosed spaces. But even then, I think what I've noticed in the office buildings is once you come in, a lot more people take their masks off in the building. You don't have to wear a mask outside. In theory, that was suggested you do it in April, but it was already said you don't have to. So if you're out in an open air space, you're away from shop fronts and offices, you're allowed to walk around without one. Though I do notice people going to work, coming back from work, still usually wearing the mask as well, just because it's easier to have it on pretty much until you arrive where you're going to be.
So actually, I mean, mask wearing is no more mandatory anymore. So you can just go around without a mask. That's not a problem. And I think even you were saying inside the offices, you don't need to wear a mask either, right?
You get into the office building, you probably do. So that's because you have to go through, take a temperature check. And then once you're in your office, like on our floor, I'll notice some people walk around with a mask going between places. Inside the office, people, I think for politeness, will wear a mask still for the most part. But it's I notice that's observed sort of half-half. It's not that regular or formal.
So I guess it sounds like things are kind of gone back to normal, and it sounds as though there's been a good control, and doesn't seem as though it's coming back, because I don't think there are any new cases in Shenzhen anymore at all, right?
We had a period where there was sort of incoming cases from overseas or from people returning, but I think people who have coughed on their neighbor and gotten them sick, there's been something like 110 days or so without any of those kinds of cases. So they'd call them local cases. There's not been for more than 100 days. I think import cases has been probably like 70 days, something like that. There was a little bit of concern of people coming in when Beijing had a breakout at the beginning of the beginning of this month. Last month, no, it's already July. Yeah, so at the beginning of June, there was a Beijing breakout. There were a few concerns. Had anybody come in by plane? But those people were all tracked very carefully. 2 weeks went by, nothing came out. But I would say that it's a high degree of cautiousness. I think everybody's a little bit concerned about what a second wave would mean, and that leads to pretty decent diligence. I think people are really aware that they want to make it, be smart about being ready for something to happen. But I think most businesses are very cautious. This hasn't been good for small, medium businesses in China, and I imagine in most places, small, medium businesses have probably taken a huge hit from this experience. It's not good for big businesses. One would hope big businesses are designed to survive that.
I don't know about China, but in Singapore, I think more than 10% of all companies have closed. We are up to I think not as much as 20, but like between 10 to 20% have closed. Yeah. So, but I mean, I guess it's great to hear the normalcy that's there, because it's like light at the end of the tunnel, right? Because Australia has come back, Hong Kong has come back, different parts of Europe. Certainly in America. So it's great to hear that. I mean, it's gotten down to the extent of 110 days without local transmission. That's really like hope, more than anything.
Exactly. So I think that's the good sign, is that everybody will be, and hopefully it's a sign for sort of a global litmus, right? That even when things get calm, people stay cautious, right? Because the last thing we want is people just being kind of unnecessarily careless. So it seems like that's what we get in the news a lot. because we get interesting media in this part of the world that there's big parties here, there's big parties there, there's a COVID party. So I think we're all I don't imagine in China we'll still see easy access coming into the country, just because our media has been curated to indicate to us the rest of the world is super dangerous.
But I mean, do you see any long-term impact, like going the next 6 months? Do you see that there's going to be anything, I presume, because I heard that China is going into a recession for this year. So economically, as you've mentioned, there's some impact. But do you see any impact in terms of the way of lives other than this cautiousness around?
Well, I think the government has done a nice job of emphasizing it's not about GDP growth this year. It's about trying to make sure people have salaries. So there's been an attempt to make sure that the economy stays healthy in the sense that people are staying employed. So employment is the target rather than GDP growth, which is a bit of a different focus. Anyway, the idea in the past is GDP growth would lead to employment, but now we realize that you're not going to guarantee that. You just want to make sure people have jobs so they can pay for things. That being said, I've not seen the number on the impact on small, medium businesses, but a lot of China is small, medium businesses. And walking around some neighborhoods where there's restaurants and shops, you still see a few shops that have definitely been shut down or restaurants that have been closed. So for some of those service industry sectors, I imagine the impact is going to be there. So that sense of normalcy, I think, will be one of the things that people will hopefully establish sooner than later, which is that those businesses or replacement businesses where people can get the job and employment level up will come back. I think that's been on everybody's mind, but it does feel a little bit better that those things are things that can be achieved as well. I mean, it seems like that's something that we'll bounce back from relatively quickly.
Okay, I mean, I guess that's probably, I don't know, again, that's probably a consolidation that you're looking at. I mean, I'm sure that there will be, some small, medium enterprises that will close and perhaps new ones will open, maybe doing stuff like, health checks and, better sanitation. Certainly those areas, I think there's a lot of growth in it. Yeah. But as in like the way of life, I mean, do you find people will be more at home now? Schools will be more at home, or you think, it's just going to go back to what it was?
I think we learned we don't want to keep our kids at home for school.
Me too.
from parent netizens is let's get them back in school. We've learned a lesson. I think we're impressed by how much we could do, right? A lot of jobs are still on sort of pandemic times, so people can come in a little bit later so they can avoid busy metros. They can take days to work from home. They're still avoiding crowded meeting rooms in multinational companies, so people are still sort of taking a lot more meetings on virtual set, even if it's just from their own desk. So I think that amount of work life is definitely going to be a little bit more balanced as people realize that there's crowding is normal in major cities in Asia, but there's an attempt to sort of say, well, we don't have to actually put people in that sort of harm's way. So it'll be very interesting to see as next year begins, how much people break out of that pandemic mode and how much of that stays that new normal. But I do see, at least for where we work, there's usually a lot more flexibility for people. If you need to come in a little later, come in a little later. If you need to go a little earlier, go a little earlier. If you want to do this from home, do it from home. That flexibility that I don't think was nearly as present in the past is definitely something that's become sort of embedded in the way we work right now. It seems likely that we'll see more of that in the future.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I would love to talk more with you. And if you want to hear more from John, not just John, but also my other panelists from South Korea, from Spain, from US, and also here in Singapore, please come and join me. It'll be on the 27th of July, Monday at 2 p.m. Singapore time. Actually, also 2 p.m. China time. I'm glad we have the same time. And so at 2 p.m. And so please come join us. So thank you very much, John, for all your insights. Thank you. And I mean, I really feel that talking to you gives me a sense of hope, because here in Singapore, we are still not like completely back to normal. We still have local transmission, a lot of entertainment units are still closed. So yes, I hope that one day we can achieve this 100, 200 days without any transmission. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you soon, Serene.
See you. Bye.